The 1990s were a decade brimming with immense talent, both from seasoned industry professionals and newcomers alike. At the same time, the 90s were host to a flood of fresh and innovative ideas. From technology to music to fashion, an influx in growth could be seen in the so-called good era. The film and television industries were no exception to this phenomenon, and these two artistic mediums underwent massive changes pertaining to who was allowed a seat at the table, what stories were being told, and who was beginning to be allowed to translate these stories to the screen for audiences to enjoy. While the television industry was witnessing a new era that focused less on shared experiences and more on appealing to individualized and less generalizable experiences, thanks to the evolving state of television which divided audiences into smaller subsets, the film industry in the 90s was a revolutionary decade for movies, both on and behind the scenes, particularly when considering the amount of new voices able to break through and make waves in the industry, like Spike Jonze, Paul Thomas Anderson, Christopher Nolan, and Quentin Tarantino, just to name a few. With this new ensemble of directors, the films being produced during this time were dynamic and self-aware pictures that were a breath of fresh air. It's no wonder that this era of movie magic has been so lovingly referred to as a fairy tale decade that left no filmic genre untouched. When searching for the best directors of the 90s on Google, however, the results are, very predictably, very white, which undersells the sheer amount of talent and diversity that was blooming within this era. The 90s were witness to a more diverse on-screen repertoire, and for the purpose of this video, we will be specifically looking at the community of Black creatives, showrunners, and filmmakers who produce content with the intention of appealing expressly to the Black community, instead of simply creating a display of Blackness that was often marred by stereotypes and preconceived notions that were meant to be palatable to white audiences. This conscious choice to appeal to Black audiences forcibly created space, which previously did not exist on a large scale, for the existence of three-dimensional Black characters on screen. However, in order to accurately assess the importance of this, it feels crucial to examine the portrayals of Black characters conceptualized within the white gaze in movies done both by Black, non-Black, and Black filmmakers alike, while simultaneously giving an introspective look at the Black characters who were created by us and for us. Disclaimer that the idea of movies by us for us is in and of itself vulnerable to pitfalls, as there will always be members of a community who, for one reason or another, seek proximity to whiteness as a concept. In many films directed by non-Black creatives and even some Black filmmakers attempting to appeal to white audiences, Black characters simply just do not exist. But when they do, they are side characters meant to bolster the, often white, main character. They are vehicles for sassy and catchphraseable one-liners that, often, are just botched attempts at slang. Moreover, whether or not they are cast aside and forgotten side characters, they are often flat. Calling them two-dimensional feels too kind for what they truly are, but they are individuals who lack depth and life. What's worse, they are stereotypical. Their actions and motives are framed through a white lens of success and danger, but also through a white lens of livelihood. Take the movie White Men Can't Jump, starring Woody Harrelson and Wesley Snipes, for example. In this film, director Ron Shelton attempts to combat stereotypes with more stereotypes by placing them on the same scale of offensiveness, or, worse, not recognizing the harm done in the design of Wesley's character Sidney, who lives in a rough neighborhood with his family and is crooked enough to throw Woody Harrelson's character, Billy, under the bus for quick cash. While there are obviously people out there like this, and those who live in these exact environments, the film feels more like one that seeks to confront the less than savory stereotypes about white folks while doing nothing to really combat those presented surrounding Black people. The artifice created in this film is clearly not one that belongs to Shelton, and it shines through at every turn, more so with how flat of a character Sidney really is. His traits can more or less be defined as living in the hood, wanting to get out of the hood, and willing to sell out and betray a business partner for the right price. He lacks depth, he lacks true character, and his entire existence is seen through the white gaze and a white person's perception of the hood as an othered, unimaginable, dangerous conceptual boogeyman and a hypothetical and loose understanding about the life within it. The movie, despite its predominantly non-white cast, feels like it's geared more towards a non-Black audience given its palatable views on Blackness that fit into the schema or stereotypes that already existed on the Black existence. Even in more serious films like Jeff Pollock's Above the Rim, the same can clearly be seen, if not more so. This 90s hood film is brimming with harmful anti-Black stereotypes which include, but are not limited to, the topic of single mothers, drug dealers, and the nature of inner-city violence. This movie, however, fails to see any of these topics through in a way that matters, and, as such, there is a distinct lack of the why present in films such as these. Duane Martin's character, Kyle, deals with tough and turbulent relationships with his sport of basketball and the people around him, but the connection between these two, which feels obvious despite the lack of attention afforded to it within the film, is never truly followed through. This movie, which ends with a display of gun violence in another stereotypical fashion, also concludes with an aforementioned issue regarding black films created by non-black individuals, the white schema of success. Specifically, the pedagogy behind education as the only way out. To give this historical context, education has always been seen as the key to success.
My teachers are nice.
Get an education.
It's time to change your mind.
At the same time, education in general, but especially higher education, is an elitist institution that has been something that black people have been purposefully kept out of. While it is true that black people have fought to be included in those spaces, it is also true that we have forged our own spaces and created our own paths, whether that be in our entrance into the workforce or through HBCUs. Success has always meant many things, but Pollock's choice to send Kyle to college as the only means of escape, especially to a predominantly white institution such as Georgetown, inevitably plays into the white elitist views and further subjects the black characters to the white gaze. This is a direct contrast to black cinema, which featured movies by black filmmakers for the black moviegoer. This is not to say that these films also did not deal in stereotypes or other inter-community issues, but it is to say that the impetus usually changes when it is black people talking about what they know rather than white and non-black people talking about what they have heard yet never lived. In these movies, black characters, both main and side characters alike, are complex characters with notable characteristics who, while they may occasionally be defined by their struggle, are still given the room to exist as whole people outside of it. They experience growth and hardships, and, best of all, they are never stagnant. Take another Wesley Snipes movie, Down in the Delta, for example. This film, which is both the debut and swan song for the incredible Maya Angelou, also tackles the topic of escaping dangerous conditions of the hood and inner city life, and yet, the care devoted to this topic is a stark contrast than that of Ron Shelton and Jeffrey Pollock's respective films. The movie, which explores black existence not just as a monolith of hardship, but rather as an intersectional identity, focuses on the why of how the hardships they face exist. It confronts the system and examines it beyond just noting that such a system vaguely exists. Though Mary Alice's character also longs to escape the inner city life, the idea is handled brilliantly and with care. For example, while Mary Alice sends her kid and grandchildren away, it is by no means the magic cure. Although the film plays into the idea of the city versus the country, the move does not magically fix their issues. In fact, it is far from it. They all still struggle to adjust and must confront a variety of conflicts over their time in Mississippi. This is a direct contrast for Pollock and Shelton, whose films clearly view a ticket out of the hood, whether it be money or college, as the be-all end-all rather than the first step. Nevertheless, this film places emphasis on community, something that is vital to black people and yet so often forgotten. The characters experience conflict and hardships, but they also exist outside of them, and ebb and flow just as disproportionately as real-life people do. The film focuses on family renewal as a means of success and survival, while managing to discuss black self-determination, no matter how on the nose it is conveyed throughout the Sinclair's reclamation of the former plantation as a means of taking back their power from white people. Although exceptions to the rule will always exist, the 90s decade of cinema were a breath of fresh air. Movies were, for the most part, very complex and thought-provoking. The increase in new voices in low-budget films aided in this, but the breakthrough of black filmmakers onto the scene so perfectly managed to diversify not just the faces seen on screen, but the stories being told and the meticulous and loving care being afforded in telling these stories. The difference this made as to how black characters were being presented and portrayed at the time cannot be understated.